What's up, everyone? Beast Mode back here with another video. So today I think I'm going to discuss a bit of the side decking choices for upcoming RBET. So I've been having a lot of questions regarding, what's the new side deck tech, what's the new metagame that we should be preparing for. So at this point, I would say it's pretty obvious that Machina is a real deck, and moving forward, I would guess that we're going to be seeing a lot more of that, especially in the top cut. So I would definitely have some side deck pieces for that deck. Also fairies. Obviously, fairies won the whole event at the Deck Devastators 3 tournament, the Carpath build. I'm not sure it's better than regular fairies deck. I don't really know at all, but all I know is that there's fairies everywhere now, so we're going to have something for that deck. So that's 2. Number 3, there is a dragon deck that got second place. I'm not sure if that was just a fluke thing or if the deck is really that good. Is probably wasn't many played, so that's pretty good representation if it was just a couple people playing the deck and it made it to the finals. So we got to think about that as well on the sideboard. So we have those 3 decks that are kind of emerging right now, and then we have the decks that have been around for quite some time, such as Black Wings, which is just always relevant. It's a large portion of the metagame. Vayu Turbo, which seems to be kind of quieting down a little bit. It's still prevalent, but I think the deck is good. I'm just not seeing as much of it. I think one might have made the top cut, and it was playing with psychics and kinetic power wells and all that. So I would still expect to see Blackwing Bayou. And of course, Zombie still played. I think there were 17 zombie decks at the Deck Devastators 3 tournament. And the closest one to top was myself. I ended up getting 9th place. So the deck is obviously having a difficult time in the current metagame right now, which I discussed prior to that tournament. I felt that the zombies probably weren't in the best place. Still kind of in the same place. Not much has changed for them. If anything, things have gotten a little bit worse because of the whole fairy metagame. And I don't know the matchup with machines yet. I really haven't played enough of them, so I can't say that's a good or bad matchup. I know they play hamsters, the machine deck, which is crazy, right? Machines playing hamsters or Rykos, but that's what they are playing. So that does pose some of a challenge, but it's not the biggest a deal. Like I've said, we can handle that stuff. It's just a lot of the side deck hate for the deck. So again, I would suggest, I don't know why I keep saying suggest. I would expect that at the RBET tournament in the next couple weeks, we would see a good portion of Fairy, Dragon, the Machine deck. We're going to see Blackwing. We're going to see Vayu, and there are going to be some zombie players. And then we have the big elephant in the room, which is the Frog deck. That deck is everywhere right now. I'm playing on Dueling Book, constantly running into the deck. That is going to be the biggest issue, I think, moving forward. So there was one RBET that we suspected that there would be a large number of frog decks, and I think there might have been a large number played, but they didn't end up making the top cut because people are so heavily side decking for them. And I think this is going to be a similar situation where going into RBET, it's probably not a good call to play frogs because I think that people are just going to be doing everything they can to dedicate a sideboard to it, especially like zombie players. You don't have a choice. You really have to do that or you just don't win. Can't play the game. I think Snack, Crow's Nest channel there, had put out a video regarding the statistics, and zombies had like a 25% win rate against frogs during that tournament, and I believe it. I actually dodged frog players the whole time, which is probably why I almost, nearly made the top 8. I made the top 12 cut. So again, a lot of that requires bracket luck, and if you play 1 or 2 frog decks as a zombie player, you're probably not going to be doing well. So I do think there's going to be frogs everywhere. So to summarize, I think we're going to see a lot of fairies, a lot of Machina, a lot of Blackwing, a lot of Vayu, zombie, frogs going to be everywhere, and we might see a couple dragon decks. So with that being said, these are some of the side deck cards I think that you could consider. This is not the every card that there is. It's not all inclusive. There's other things you can play. I'm sure I whip this up in a few minutes. I'm sure there's others that are probably better, but leave comments below and let me know. These are some of the ones I would consider definitely moving forward. So Chain Disappearance is kind of cool. I think I've had this or experimented with this in the past. It definitely can hit the frog deck with the Treeborn. You can hit the Treeborn. You can hit the dupes. It can hit other things too. Obviously, it can hit Diva in a zombie matchup. It can hit the Vayus if they summon those. So it does have some utility in multiple matchups. So this could be something you could consider moving forward. Especially, I think this is probably best against frogs. I'm not sure how good this is against frogs, but it is an option. Dinah seems to be picking up steam in sideboards. I think it's necessary. You need it for the frog matchup. And even this is still not a definite answer to the frogs because they side deck in soul exchanges. And also junk can just be summoned and run over it, but it's probably the best bet we have. Intercept is another card I actually just kind of started trying a little bit. I'm not sure how good this card really is. It's really just good against the Monarch matchup, and you hope to essentially intercept one of the Monarchs. I believe they still get their effect, so you can chain it, but you take control of it. So it's not bad if you get to take control of a Vanity's Fiend or something like that. So that would be something you can consider or maybe play around with a little bit. I don't know if it's going to make the cut or not because it's very niche. It only really affects that deck. So you really want your side deck to be very broad, right? That it can, when you put in a card in your sideboard, you have very limited spots. You want that card to work against multiple matchups. So this card probably isn't one that does that, but something you can play around with if your frog matchup is just brutal. Pulling the rugs, I think, have to be in the sideboard. They've pretty much been in the sideboard. I think they're necessary. It can hit the junk, can hit the Monarch deck, can hit Machinas, it hits a lot. It can hit Diva. It hits a lot of cards. All the Caius, which is probably the best card of the format. So pulling the rug probably should be in the sideboard, 2 or 3, depending on how many you can fit in there. Massive Restrict also is an option. Can slow down the frog deck a bit, the frog Monarch deck. They have answers for them. Some of them playing Regeki Breaks and Wing Blast and side decking in some hate, knowing that this card may come in. So it's definitely an option. I find that Skill Drain's probably a bit better, excuse me, depending on the deck that you're playing. I think that a lot of zombie decks are actually side decking this card. The problem is it's a 2 of, and you have to see it. If you don't see the card or you see it too late, it's awful, right? If they've already dropped 3 Monarchs on you, it's probably not going to do any good when you're top decking it with 2 cards in your hand. So it's a great card if you can open it turn 1. They also have responses to it, like same thing with Massive Restrict. It's along the same idea as Massive Restrict. So you have to kind of pick, right? Massive Restrict at least lets you play. You can do a lot of synchro plays. You can still do the Brio, bounce, and all that, where Skill Drain doesn't really let that happen. It's hard to say which one's better. I think Skill Drain's probably better because it has a little bit more. You can put it in against Gladiator Beast, really shuts down that deck. It's a lot more options for you can put it in against Lightsworn. You can put it in against you can probably put it against the machine deck. I'm not sure how good it would be, but so there's a little bit more versatility with this card. Zombie World's another option. So this here is probably best against the frog deck. It's good against the fairy deck as well. Turns everything into zombies, so you don't have to worry about Christia. Then I'm essentially not going to have fairies. What I find interesting is that the Machina decks are actually side decking Zombie World to stop you from being able to board in Cyber Dragon against them because everything becomes zombies and that you can't contact fuse. So against the Machina deck, I'm not sure they would side deck this in, especially if you're playing zombies. That would be kind of dumb, but this is an option to sideboard, especially let's say you're not even playing zombies. If you are playing the Machina deck, this could be a very good side choice for you. You can essentially protect all your machines and turn off the other deck at the same time. So that's something to consider if you didn't know about it. Light Imprisoning Mirror, I think, has to be in your sideboard now. I know at Worlds, RBT Rulers, I did not actually have Light Imprisoning Mirrors in my sideboard because I wasn't expecting any Lightsworn and Fairies. I just didn't think anybody would play. And of course, Pro Stone won the whole event with Fairies. And I played a Lightsworn and a Christia Sworn deck that day. So you never feel good not having a side deck option. It's one of those things where the side deck is so tight that you just want to get value out of every card you put in there. And you're like, well, if I don't play this matchup, having 2 Light Imprisoning Mirrors or 3 Light Mirrors is just so dead. That happens. If you look at Carpath's deck from the last event, he actually side decked heavy for the Dragon matchup because he knew his deck could not beat it. And for the most part, especially Disaster Dragon, hasn't really been relevant at all. And he dedicated a good portion of his sideboard to it. And, coincidentally, he actually played against one in the finals. And obviously the sideboard really helped out. So sometimes just side decking heavily for a matchup that you just know you can't beat is a good strategy. And even if you don't see it, well, your deck should be geared towards beating those other matchups because, you don't have a whole lot of sideboard for them. And, you can kind of, I guess you got to take the wins where you can. So Light Mirror, I think, have to be in the sideboard right now. I do think there's going to be a lot of people just hopping on the Fairy deck. People typically like to play things that are relevant and recent and that win. So I do expect to see Fairies and a lot of Machina. That would be my expectation. So Book of Moon is next. I don't know how good this card is in the sideboard. It never really feels good side decking in a Book of Moon. Like, When do you ever feel like you want to do that? I think the only time you really want to have these in the sideboard is if you are playing against a fairy deck and their main decking Royal Decree, you can kind of side out some of the traps and put in the Book of Moons. It is a decent card right now overall. It's been in a lot of the top deck, a lot of the decks that topped recently. They've been decking at least one copy. I think the card is probably a better main deck card rather than a side deck card. It's hard to say. I put it here. I think the card is probably more relevant now than it has been before, and I think people are catching on to it. So you could side deck 1 or 2 copies if you just want to have some disruption game 2 or 3 if you expect somebody's putting in a Royal Decree. Thunder King, definitely a good card right now. It's been a good card. Turns off Goblin Zombie, turns off... Pretty much, you drop that turn 1 against the Dragon Turbo deck. It really can shut them down. Stops a lot of synchro plays. Just a decent card. Can really stop the Lightsworn deck from adding cards, or the Machina deck, rather, can stop that deck from just adding the Fortress with the gear frame and all that. So, decent card. If you have room, might be worth side decking. My Body as a Shield's probably, I would say, has to be in your sideboard at this point. Maybe even main deck, depending on the deck you're playing. If you're playing Quick Draw, Frogs, I do think that there's a chance that they're going to stop main decking this. And if they're not, they're already side decking it, because Deck Devastation Virus just destroys you. The problem is this card does not guarantee that it plays around it, because if your opponent goes first and has the first turn, let's say they're playing Bayou, they set up the first turn deck Devi play, they can just deck Devi in your draw phase and you don't have a monster on the field to My Body. So there is ways to play around it, but I feel like you have to have it. I think in the last tournament, Rognok actually got deck devastated for 8 cards total and pretty much just eliminated his chances of winning the game, because the card it destroys almost every card in the deck aside from the Monarchs. Zombies have a tough time too. It kills a lot of the zombie cards. At least you have Book of Life to kind of, reborn one of them, but it hits a lot of the main decks besides, of course, Blackwing. That's why they're the best deck, because they're just so resilient. So My Body might be a good side deck choice depending on the deck you're playing. Probably not that good if you're playing the Machine deck, because everything's pretty big. So we'll move on to the next card here, Soul Taker. So this card I'm kind of growing on me a little bit here, because I really love Smashing Grounds. I don't know if you've seen most of my sideboards. I side deck in Smashing Ground almost every game. It's just one of my favorite game 2 cards just to put in, just generic 1-for-1. But this card here might be better just because of the fact that it makes things miss timing, specifically Dimensional Alchemist and Dupe Frog. Not that I don't overly care about Dupe Frogs getting back a frog, but it can be annoying that you spend a bunch of resources to blow up a board. Let's say you Black Rose, and then they end up getting back 2 frogs from the deck or graveyard. So again, it's not the worst thing with the frog deck grabbing back random swap frogs. It can, obviously, if they have already spent their swap frogs, now they can bounce back Monarch. So it can be a problem, but this is better against Dimensional Alchemist, definitely making it miss timing. So I don't know entirely moving forward. I might be just playing the Soul Taker instead of the Smash Ground. Also, the bonus with Soul Taker is that you can specifically target the card you want to destroy. So sometimes Smashing Ground will hit another monster on the field and miss the Dark Arm. So and you really need to get Dark Arm off the board, but Smashing Ground won't do it. It'll hit something else. The downside is that it targets. So certain cards can negate it, such as Titanial. So, or if they book and they have multiple monsters on the field, they can book the monster you're trying to destroy, and that's that. Whereas Smashing Ground will still destroy something. So I think both of them are good. You have to decide which way you want to go. Of course, giving somebody 1,000 life points is also not that great, depending on the deck you're playing. For me, I don't ultimately care. I do play zombies, but I don't play the deck trying to OTK people. So for me, 8,000, 9,000 really doesn't matter all that much. That's me personally. I know a lot of people, obviously it's hard. You can't OTK at 9,000. The deck can just do about 8,000 depending on the hand. So that's some decisions that you'd have to make personally, but I think either of these is fine. And I think that some of them have to be in the sideboard to some extent, just because probably Soul Taker, just because of the light deck, the fairy and the light deck that's going to be everywhere. The Chaos fairy deck, whatever Carpath's deck is. Triple Cyber Dragon. So obviously we can only play 2 in our format, but Cyber Dragon has to be in the sideboard with the Machina deck. I know that they are side decking Zombie World, but I think that you have to still put them in and just slam Cyber Dragon when they don't have the Zombie World, because the card's just such a blowout. They have a board, 2 or 3 guys on the board, and you can just, drop a Fortress with 4,000 attack. I think the card's a staple. There was a very small time where people were kind of cutting them. I actually considered it myself just because there was no machines around. And then out of nowhere, the machine decks are just everywhere now. So definitely going to be a staple in the sideboard continuing on. DD Crow. Card's just always in the sideboard. Actually, I feel like I know it's a staple, but the card feels so lackluster. I just don't even like side decking it in because I don't know. I feel like it doesn't do enough in certain matchups. It doesn't feel good just DD crowing a value sometimes because I always say this when I'm talking to teammates. You spend the whole game trying to DD crow a bunch of values or treeborn frogs, and then they play one burial and everything goes right back in the graveyard. And you spent 3 DD crow to do that, and they reverse it with 1 burial. I don't think this card is particularly great against the frog deck because I don't think hitting treeborn frog does enough. I really don't. They have battle faders that they just drop and they still can use monarchs that way. They have junk synchrons bringing guys back from the graveyard. Of course you can DD crow the target, but does that feel good? DD crowing a dupe frog, like if you have to. The card, I think the card still has to be in the sideboard, and because certain decks it can really hurt. Zombies is probably the deck it hurts the most, of course, right? Every card seems to hurt zombies, but it can stop value, and of course, the only card that they have that really can reverse the DD Crows is the Burial, and when they play Burial on you anyway, it's pretty much game. The card's just so busted in that deck. So, again, I don't really particularly care for DD Crow. I never really have, but it's one of those cards where you just kind of have to have. You don't want to leave home without it, but it doesn't excite me that much. It's not really good against Lightsworn either. You're sitting there DD crowing one card at a time, and then milling more lights or names, and the fairy deck's the same way. You try to keep them off 4 fairies for Chrysia the whole time, and they're just putting them in there. They just keep putting the fairies in there, and eventually they're going to drop Chrysia. Like, that's what the deck does. So I think the card is better when it's like a perfectly timed DD Crow. It really stops a combo, which is zombies specifically most of the time. Or, just turns off a Chrysia right at the right time, and your opponent can't do anything to follow up. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if you see people just cutting this card because I just don't know if it does enough, but I'm not brave enough to cut it, so take that for what it's worth. And Triple Dust Tornado is another card that you find everybody side deck. I'm not sure why we're all still side decking these cards. I guess that we put them in for the Blackwing matchup and the Vayu matchup, which I'm not sure how they're positioned right now. Blackwings is still the best deck, but I'm not sure where Vayu is sitting right now. I'm not sure if Vayu's the 3rd best deck. I really don't know. The card's still good. You just want to have it, a couple of them anyway. If you're not main decking 1 or 2, it's good to have one on the side deck. You never know if you're going to play Burn, or it could answer specifically if you're playing machines, or certain decks you can answer, maybe Zombie World, or whatever the case may be. You can answer some of those cards. It's just a generic 1-for-1. I don't think it's terrible. I think it's best sideboard in against Blackwing. But so that's kind of my quick sideboard take right now. I wanted to get a video out. I'm sure there's other cards that I didn't discuss. Please comment below, and we can, or the Discord server I actually made last week. You can join the Discord server. It's in the description. We are having discussions there. We're talking about decks. I am hosting tournaments every Friday night. It's a 16-person single elimination tournament. First come, first serve. Entry fee is always free. We play for free. We join for free. There's no cost to enter. All you have to do is be a subscriber and join on the Discord, really. So those tournaments go on Friday nights. I stream the event. We watch the matches. We kind of have a good stream going, and we chill out, and we just talk Yu-Gi-Oh! And have a good time. So those are Friday nights. Join the Discord. I also answer comments on the videos, so I will be looking for those. And also, I see on the YouTube algorithm that like 60% of the people that are watching these videos are not subscribing, yet they still are watching. So I would ask if you are watching just to subscribe, because it really helps the channel in all aspects, really, right? With the whole stream and all that, and it keeps me motivated to keep doing this stuff. So if you have any questions, let me know. And until next time, I'll see you all in the next one.